Before beginning college, I had the opportunity to go spend approximately 2 weeks in India with my uncle. We flew into the capital, Delhi, and spent about 2 weeks in the surrounding countryside and exploring Delhi. It was an amazing opportunity, and one of the highlights of the trip was seeing the Taj Mahal. It's a very grand building, something that was really, seeing it in person, an amazing experience. And we also got to see a lot of religious buildings and sites. This is us in the second biggest Sikh temple in India, in the world, helping create a meal for the locals. One of the things that struck me the most and that I brought home from my trip to India was seeing my culture, seeing the US culture in India. And this story starts with my first chai tea. It was our second day in India, and the locals are always selling chai tea. Everyone stops 3 or 4 times a day for chai. So we thought we should try the tradition, and it's something that I love now. And in this picture, I might be enjoying the tea, but little did I know in about 30 minutes, it was going to feel like my stomach was coming out of my mouth, and I had a case of Delhi belly, or Montezuma's revenge, however you know it. And of course, when you have a bad experience with foreign food, what sounds good is some home cooking, something you know, something that's not risky. And that is McDonald's when you're in India, because you can't get any other type of American food. And even then, there's no beef, so you're eating McEggs and McVeggies. But it was really cool. It was one of the most busiest places we went in all of India was this McDonald's restaurant. And so thinking about it as I'm back in the States and as I'm exploring and learning about business and finance, one thing that it spurred my interest about India and that I keep coming back to is it's very interesting to see how our lives play a role in their lives and what we're doing. And what I really want to explore and what I've really looked into the more and more I get into business is how their lives are going to begin to affect our lives. And so what I want to talk about today is India and the global workforce and how the tides have shifted, what it means to us. So basically how India is changing and how it's going to affect us, because it's going to affect our everyday lives as well. The first thing I want to talk about is globalization. When you think of globalization, you think of kind of a historic term, a keyword, something from the past. But I think it's very important to realize that we're in the midst of it currently. And as we come up with new technologies, such as video conferencing and other cheaper telecommunication things, we're going to continue to see increasing changes, and we're going to have more and more globalization as we go along, and we're going to become more interconnected. And so I want to explore this globalization and this interconnectivity going forward. I think I want to talk about the US going forward and what the future of the US looks like. First off, the US has a couple of problems that it's starting to encounter in its growth. The first of those being that it has, compared to India, such a small population. The US has about 300 million people, while India has about 1.2 billion people. So out of sheer numbers, we're at a competitive and economic disadvantage. And there's also some education problems within the United States. We have consistently lagged behind other countries, particularly in the math and science fields. And so going forward, that's really something that's going to hurt our global competitiveness. India has problems of its own. Some of the important ones that I want to talk about are the rural poor. There's still a big discrepancy in the top half and the lower half of the nation. And also the infrastructure problems. This is something that you've probably heard about before, something you hear about in the news, and that is the problems with the roads and the wiring and the buildings in India. I encountered this personally while I was there. Some of the pictures that I had seen that were very powerful before going to India were pictures of wires all over the place, and it was something that I was able to capture. And the other thing that's really big is the roads. There was a lot of bumpy rides while we were driving between city to city. And you see that here as we were driving to a major city. It was the capital of this state. And of course, we're stopped on the road by a herd of sheep. And so when you have problems like this, it's kind of hard to get investment and stuff like that. And so India's advancing, though, and it's putting the past behind itself. As I talked about, there's improving infrastructure, and there's a rising middle class. The poverty has decreased 30% since about 1985, and we're going to see more and more of that as more and more Indians come into wealth. They'll be able to buy more and more things and experience a higher standard of living. And the last thing that you think of when you think of a country modernizing and coming to is kind of the social injustices and the social equality. And there's been big strides made in India with gender equality and especially religious peace in a country that has had a lot of past conflict with that. There are now women leaders and Muslim leaders very high up in the Indian government, and so it's something that we're seeing a lot of progress being made on. So as India gets past those obstacles, it has some assets, some characteristics that are going to make it grow very, very, very quickly. The biggest of those being, one of the biggest of those being education. India, as a culture, highly values their education, and you can see by their government investment that they've put a lot of money into this and show that they really do value it. And so when you have a heavy investment like this, $44 billion, you get results, and they have. And so between the heavy investment and so the increasing education system in India, as well as their sheer numbers, they're garnering a big edge in the skilled labor force in the global workforce. And so they really have a competitive edge just from sheer numbers. So you can see that these numbers are from the Center for American Progress. India is expected in 2017 to have 20 million high school graduates per year by that year. In the US, we only have 4. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that these numbers are based off only 50% high school enrollment in India. In the USA, we have 90% enrollment. So if India ever got its enrollment number up to where ours is, we'd expect almost 40 million high school graduates per year in the country. And this transfers over to college as well. India, by the year 2020, is expected to have 8 million college graduates a year. The US only has 2 million per year. And so we're going to see this become more and more of an issue just out of sheer numbers. And in addition to the education, India is catching up in technology and modernization very, very, very quickly. Something that they've been able to take advantage of to catch up so rapidly is leapfrogging technologies. The biggest example of this is mobile phones and the mobile market. When I was in India, one thing that I noted that was very surprising to me was the number of mobile phones. There's reportedly 800 million mobile phone subscribers in India, which is more than twice the entire population of the United States. And what's interesting about the mobile phones and the cell phones in India is that once India started to modernize, it went from essentially very little telecommunications directly to the cell phones and technology that we use now. Because they came into the game later, they were able to skip the whole landline phase. And so we'll see this with more and more technologies like cars and other things, that they're able to skip kind of the middle phase that took the US so long to get where it is. A good example of this is online education. Even with the 8 million college graduates a year, by the year 2020, there's a possibility that 100 million eligible Indian students don't have a university that has room for them. And one way we can solve this is through online courses and these massively online integrated things that big American universities are putting on, universities such as Harvard. And with an access to a computer and Wi-Fi, it's possible for dozens, or if not, 100 million of these Indian students to get a prestigious American degree just from their computer. And in addition to the leapfrogging technologies, we see a lot of entrepreneurship and innovation in India. Something that they have to do is tackle problems that we don't have to deal with anymore, such as water and transportation and electricity, in very novel ways. Their solutions have to be able to be implemented cheaply and at a mass scale. The MIT Entrepreneurship Review, an MIT Entrepreneurship Review article talked about this company, Selco, which is a social entrepreneur company. And what they do is provide solar lighting and solar electricity to small Indian street vendors. 75% of their customers make less than $1.25 a day. And so it's amazing that they're coming up with these novel technologies. And this really carries over to the corporate world, where these big companies have these advanced technologies and innovative cores and culture. And so when we have the highly skilled labor force, as well as the modernization and the high-tech companies, we get a very competitive country. And as more and more as globalization comes along, we're going to see the interconnectivity of the global jobs. And the labor market is going to be a worldwide thing, and not just in the US and not just in India. And so when they become more competitive, we're going to be competing kind of for the same jobs. So what does a global workforce mean to you personally? One important thing that it means going forward, no matter what, is that you're going to have a lot of long-distance work relationships. This includes everything from video conferencing, business partners in India, to having clients over there or coworkers over there. And there's also probably going to be a lot of satellite offices that you see in foreign countries. This is most particularly because of the new target market and the new customer base that's coming about. Meera Shankar, the Indian ambassador to the United States, in 2011 gave an address, a keynote address at Emory University. And she said that with the rising middle class, India will soon be 1/5 of the consumer market. So 1/5 of all the customers on earth are going to be in India. So more and more it's going to be important to focus on the Indian market and what they mean to our businesses. And in addition to the work relationships and the customers, we're going to have increasing specialization going forward. The manufacturing jobs are going to go to China. The IT jobs are going to go to India. And more, you're going to have to focus on one particular thing and focus on what your comparative advantage is. Because the free market is going to send the jobs to where the lowest labor is for that field. And so it's important that you don't get caught with your pants down, because otherwise you're going to be a couple years in the future and you're going to be looking silly. So in order to avoid that, there's a couple of things that are important to do. And one of those is really value your education. That's what's going to set you apart, is knowing what you know in your field, whether that's actual schoolwork or something that you've picked up on the job. And it's also being mindful of what career and what job you go into. Because of computerization and outsourcing, a lot of jobs are going to disappear or they're going to move. And it's important that you keep in mind what your job's going to be and how secure it is in the future. Thank you.